Please love Melvin Brooks.
Occupation?
Stand-up philosopher.
What?
Stand-up philosopher.
Why don't we sing a little Polish for these? Yes, yes.
When you look at Mel Brooks, you're not just seeing a man, you're staring straight at the living timeline of comedy itself. At 98 years old, Mel is a true survivor of his era, a legend who's outlived his wife, his closest friends, and nearly every giant he once stood shoulder to shoulder with. This is the man who made the world laugh until it cried, and then laughed even harder. He was the guy who shared nightly dinner trays with Rob Reiner. The two of them locked into jeopardy, like clockwork, right up until Carl's final days. But when cameras caught Mel yesterday, stepping outside his quiet, tucked away home where he's lived in semi-retirement, something felt wrong. There was no sparkle, no joke, no quick one-liner to lighten the mood. Instead, it was just Mel, looking like the weight of an entire century had finally come crashing down on him hard. For days now, headlines have been spreading like wildfire. Rob Reiner, a name tied to Hollywood royalty, suddenly caught in a story darker than anyone could have imagined. Brutal details. A shocking arrest involving his son, Nick. A family empire shattered in a single violent night. Hollywood couldn't stop whispering. Court dates, breaking news banners, non-stop speculation. It was everywhere. But through all that noise, Mel Brooks stayed silent. Not one word. And that silence, it screamed louder than any headline ever could, because everyone knows the truth. Mel wasn't just Rob's father's best friend, he was family. Uncle Mel, the man who changed Rob's diapers, the mentor who watched him grow from a sitcom kid on All in the Family into one of the most respected directors alive. So, when Mel finally opened his door to one trusted journalist, no cameras, no flashing lights, no crowd, just a tape recorder sitting between them, everything changed. What followed wasn't some polished statement or a PR-approved quote. It felt like a confession. Raw, heavy, and emotional. The kind of truth that makes you rethink everything you thought you knew about what really happened inside that Brentwood house. And once Mel Brooks finally spoke, nothing about this story would ever feel the same again. Mel didn't start with the crime, he started with guilt. A heavy kind, the kind that sits on your chest and doesn't let you breathe. He sank back into his armchair, hands shaking, not from age, but from pressure, from a quiet storm he'd been holding inside for years. This wasn't new pain. It was pain that had been sealed up and ignored for far too long. He said people keep calling this a tragedy, a sudden break, a freak moment, something no one could have seen coming. But Mel's eyes sharpened, glassy, and intense as he pushed back hard on that idea. According to him, this wasn't sudden at all, not even close. He said, "We watched a slow motion wreck for a decade and we let it roll because we loved Rob too much to tell him straight that he was making a mistake." That line didn't land softly. It hit like a hammer. And here's where it really stings. Mel Brooks, the man everyone calls gentle, admitted that the tight inner circle, the people who truly cared about Rob and Michelle, believed Nick Reiner was a danger to himself and others. Not evil, not a villain, but a situation ready to explode if it wasn't handled carefully. Mel didn't paint a monster. He painted something colder and harder to face. Parents whose love slowly twisted into the very thing that left them exposed. Love used with good intentions, but in ways that quietly backfired. This didn't happen overnight, it was built over years. Layers of hope, denial, and looking the other way, brick by brick. Then Mel shared a moment that still haunted him. One Sunday about 6 months earlier, burned into his memory. Rob had come by the same way Rob Reiner once did, but this time, something was clearly wrong. Rob barely touched his food. He couldn't sit still. He paced the room like a man who felt hunted in his own home, trapped by his last name and the chaos under his own roof. Rob told Mel that Nick had moved back into the Brentwood estate after yet another rehab stay that didn't stick. The tension inside the house, he said, was unbearable, but this time felt different, darker. Nick wasn't just struggling again. Though he was a grown man in his 30s, Rob said he had changed completely. Mel recalled Rob's exact words. Nick was paranoid, volatile, and flat out unpredictable. The kind of presence that keeps everyone on edge. The kind of tension that makes you sleep light and listen for every sound. And then Rob said something that stopped Mel cold. He admitted that he'd started locking his bedroom door every night. Not out of anger, out of fear. The kind of fear no parent ever wants to admit out loud. Just let that sink in for a second. Rob Reiner, The man who built his entire life and reputation around love, family, and open communication was barricading himself from his own son. The irony alone was crushing. When Mel asked him the question everyone was thinking, why not call the police? Why not get a restraining order? Rob's answer froze the room solid. Mel said Rob lowered his voice and replied quietly, I promised Michelle I wouldn't give up on him. If I kick him out, he dies on the street. If I keep him here, maybe I can save him. That sentence still hangs heavy in Mel's living room. Hearing it, Mel said his heart sank, and then anger rushed in fast. He slammed his hand down on the armrest as he relived the moment, telling Rob straight up that what he was doing wasn't saving his son at all. Mel told him the truth, harsh and unfiltered. This wasn't love anymore. It was sheltering danger. But Rob wouldn't hear it. That famous Reiner stubbornness kicked in. The same relentless drive that made him a legendary director, pushing for the perfect shot over and over again. But when that kind of determination gets tangled up with someone spiraling, it stops being artistic and turns deadly. And here's where the story really twists the knife. Mel's revelation wasn't just about the violence that shattered everything, it was about the slow destruction that came before it. The emotional and financial chaos that quietly ate the family alive from the inside. People see the fame, the fortune, the Castle Rock name, and assume money fixes everything. But Mel made it clear that belief couldn't be further from the truth. For the last 2 years, Mel said that Brentwood House wasn't a mansion anymore. It was a pressure cooker. Rob and Michelle were exhausted, emotionally drained, and barely holding it together. The constant crises, the bailouts, the late-night breakdowns, it was relentless. They weren't running out of money, not even close. What they were running out of was strength. According to Mel, the real damage came from non-stop pressure, the kind that wears you down slowly. Nick wasn't just asking for money anymore, he was demanding it. He framed it as payback for every hurt he believed he'd suffered growing up. Mel said Nick twisted his parents' open-minded progressive values against them, turning guilt into a weapon and calling it justice. He didn't want forgiveness, he didn't want healing. Mel said Nick believed his pain deserved millions. Not conversations, not treatment, not reconciliation, but cold, hard cash. And that belief, fueled by resentment and entitlement, poisoned everything it touched. By the time Mel finished telling this part of the story, one thing was painfully clear. What happened that night didn't come out of nowhere. It was the final crack in a foundation that had been splintering for years. Mel didn't sugarcoat it. He called it manipulation, and not the sloppy kind. He said it was sharp, calculated, and terrifyingly clear. Rob would come to him broken, tears running down his face, holding up his phone like evidence, text after text, filled with pure venom. Messages where Nick blamed Rob for everything. His addiction, his failed career, even his own unhappiness. And yet, the very next day, Rob would fold. He'd buy Nick a new car, pay for another apartment, fund some half-baked project, anything to keep the peace for one more day. Watching it unfold drove Mel crazy. He had a name for it. The Hollywood disease. That dangerous illusion that money fixes pain, that if you pour enough cash, care, and camera-ready hope into a mess, it'll magically wrap itself up like a perfect movie ending. Rob truly believed he could direct his son's redemption the same way he directed The Princess Bride. Set the scene, adjust the lighting, find the right script, but real life doesn't take cues, and it sure doesn't follow a script. Mel, a man who spent a lifetime studying tragedy through the lens of comedy, said he could see the third act forming, and it terrified him. He told the interviewer about a small holiday gathering the year before. Quiet, intimate, just family. Nick was there, and Mel swore the air in that room was so tight you could feel it pressing in. One wrong word, one wrong glance, and it felt like everything could explode. What stuck with Mel most was the way Nick watched his father that night. Not with warmth, not with love, but with something cold and measuring. Like a predator sizing up prey, the feeling sent a chill straight through him. There was a moment when Rob cracked one of his classic self-deprecating jokes, the kind only he could pull off. The room burst into laughter. Everyone laughed except Nick. He didn't smile, he didn't blink, he just stared, rigid, tense, and silent. Later that night, Mel couldn't hold it in anymore. His gut was screaming that something was seriously wrong. He pulled Rob aside, heart pounding, knowing this conversation mattered. Mel said this was the moment that still haunts his sleep. Every single night since the tragedy. He even reenacted it for the interviewer, grabbing Rob by the shoulders just like he had that night. During the interview, Mel's hands were shaking as he relived it, voice cracking when he said he grabbed Rob and told him, "Robbie, you need to get him out." Mel said it wasn't anger talking, it was fear. "He doesn't look at you with love," Mel warned. "He looks at you with ownership." The way Mel described it, the words poured out desperate, like a man trying to stop a train he knew was already speeding toward disaster. But Rob, sweet, brilliant Rob, pulled away, wounded by the warning. He told Mel, "You sound like the critics. You don't know him like I do. He's in pain." Repeating those words during the interview broke Mel completely. He couldn't hold it together anymore. Tears streamed down his face as he talked about the little boy he once watched grow up. The kid who used to sit cross-legged on the floor, laughing with Carl Reiner, carefree and innocent. That same boy, Mel said, had grown into a man who couldn't tell the difference between love and control. Admitting that crushed him. What haunted Mel most wasn't just the outcome. It was that he felt he'd seen it coming. He said he failed, not only as a friend, but as the last patriarch standing from that golden era of comedy. The era where giants looked out for one another. Mel said he believed it was his responsibility to protect what remained of that legacy, to protect Rob. And he failed, not because he didn't care, but because he didn't make the call himself, because he stayed silent when it mattered most. That regret sat heavy in his chest as he spoke. But the moment that stunned everyone listening wasn't about guilt or hindsight. It was about that night. The police timeline sounded clean and clinical. Timestamps, evidence, reports. But Mel revealed something the public hadn't heard. He said he was there, in a way, because Rob called him. It was late, long after midnight. Mel was already in bed when his phone lit up with Rob's name. That alone sent a chill through him. He said the ringing cut through the silence like an alarm. Mel admitted he almost didn't answer. Something in his gut told him this wasn't a casual call. And when he finally picked up, Rob's voice came through barely above a whisper, trembling, strained, and low. He wasn't calling to joke. He wasn't venting. He wasn't asking for advice. Mel said Rob was calling to say goodbye, even though he never actually said the words out loud. Rob just whispered, "He's spiraling again," Rob whispered into the phone, his voice tight and shaking. "He's screaming about the will. He thinks we're cutting him out." Mel said you could hear it instantly, the panic underneath every word, the quiet dread of a man cornered inside his own home. This wasn't frustration talking. This was fear. Mel didn't hesitate. His voice snapped sharp with urgency as he told him, "Get out of there, Robbie. Get in the car. Just drive. Come here." He said he was pleading now, not advising. And then came the line that stopped everything cold. The sentence that ripped this story straight out of headlines and turned it into pure tragedy. Rob answered softly, almost breaking, "I can't leave Michelle. She's in the room with him. She's trying to calm him down. If I go, he'll turn it all on her." That was the moment it hit Mel like a punch to the chest. Rob wasn't staying because he didn't see the danger. He stayed because love wouldn't let him run. Rob Reiner knew exactly what kind of fire he was walking back into. And he went anyway, not for pride, not for denial, but to protect his wife. That was the last time Mel Brooks ever heard Rob's voice. The media rushed to paint Nick as nothing but chaos, a violent storm with no shape or history. But through tears, Mel said that wasn't the full picture. He talked about the shadow, the one Nick could never escape. First, the shadow of Carl Reiner, a comedy giant. Then the shadow of Rob Reiner, a Hollywood powerhouse. And then there was Nick, third in line, born under a last name so massive it barely left room to breathe. Mel said that kind of legacy isn't a gift for everyone. It's a weight, and if you don't have the backbone for it, it will crush you. Mel was clear. Nick wasn't talentless. He had ideas, creativity, even flashes of brilliance. But he wanted the applause without the grind, the spotlight without the work. And when the industry didn't open its arms, bitterness took root. Nick convinced himself that his father's success had stolen his own chance at happiness. He blamed that shadow for everything. His failures, his anger, even his misery. Mel called it a rot, something slow, quiet, and invisible at first. Not loud, not dramatic, just eating everything from the inside out until nothing was left but ruin. From the street, the Brentwood house looked flawless. Trimmed lawns, glowing lights, picture-perfect calm. But inside, Mel said that rot had already chewed through the family's core. And what made him furious was the machine around them. The so-called support system that kept smoothing things over instead of stopping the collapse. Mel said there were therapists, doctors, and high-paid consultants circling the situation, all on the payroll, and instead of sounding alarms, they softened everything. They kept it neat, clinical, and distant when it should have been loud, urgent, and real. According to Mel, these professionals told Rob and Michelle that tough love was outdated and that radical acceptance was the right move. And Mel didn't hesitate to call them accomplices. He said they took Rob's money and fed him exactly what he wanted to hear. That Nick was just sick, not dangerous, that patience would fix it, that time would heal it. They sanitized fear with calm voices and polished reports while pressure kept building behind closed doors. They wrap danger in soft language and tidy explanations, turning real risk into paperwork. Mel said they slapped clinical labels on behavior that terrified people, giving clean names to spirals that were anything but safe. They told him it was a disorder, Mel said, his voice dropping low. But they never told him it could be a death sentence? That line hit hard because this wasn't theory anymore. This was real life, and it was deadly. That's why Mel said he's speaking now. Not for headlines, not for court drama. In his mind, the trial is just a formality. The evidence is already stacked. What he wants is the truth of his friend's life told straight, not a shallow crime label slapped onto Rob Reiner's name. Mel said Rob should be remembered first as a husband with a cracked heart long before anything violent ever happened. A man who stood his ground because he believed being a father meant protecting, even when it cost everything. Mel's story cuts deep. It forces people to confront the sharp edge of parental love, that thin line between devotion and destruction. Everyone says, "I'd die for my kids." But Rob Reiner didn't just say it, he lived it, and it cost him everything. The real tragedy, Mel said, is that his death didn't save his son. It didn't redeem anything. It only sealed a downfall that could have been stopped years earlier if someone had been brave enough to face the truth head on. As the conversation wound down, Mel's fire faded into something heavier, quiet, aching stillness. He looked around his living room, surrounded by memories, posters from Blazing Saddles and Young Frankenstein, black and white photos of Anne Bancroft, his lifelong partner, smiling back at him. Mel paused, staring into the room, and admitted he felt like a man stranded on an island, made entirely of ghosts. Mel said the hardest part now isn't the anger anymore. It's the silence. The phone doesn't ring. The house doesn't buzz. Sunday dinners are gone, he murmured, his voice thinning out as he said the link to Carl Reiner was gone too. I'm the last one, he admitted, and when he said it, his voice broke hard. He has to live knowing he saw it coming and still couldn't stop it. That kind of guilt doesn't fade. It lingers, thick and choking, like smoke trapped in a closed room. Mel spoke quietly about the upcoming funeral. Private, small, just family. He said he plans to speak, but not to perform. No jokes, no charm, just truth. The same truth he gave that reporter. And this time, he wants Hollywood to hear it loud and clear. He said every powerful father, every rich mother in this town needs to stop hiding behind therapy buzzwords and PR smiles and actually look at their kids. Really look before it's too late. According to Mel, Rob's death should be a blaring wake-up call, a flare shot into the dark, a warning that you cannot love the violence out of someone, no matter how deep your heart is or how hard you try. Mel Brooks, the man who made the world laugh at dictators, death, and absurdity, has now told his most serious story yet, one that asks a brutal question: how far should love go before it destroys everything in its path? This time, Mel said, there's no punchline, no irony, no clever twist to soften the blow. He can't turn this into comedy because there's nothing funny here. No satire, no silver lining, just the raw, brutal truth of a family torn apart from the inside out. As the journalist began packing up to leave, Mel suddenly reached out and grabbed his arm. His eyes were sharp, desperate, like there was one last thing he had to say before the door closed. Maybe to clear his conscience, maybe to warn whoever might be next. He brought up the enablers again, the people who kept the chaos alive. Mel said Nick had a whole crowd of so-called friends, hangers-on who lived off Rob's kindness and money. They weren't there to help, they were there to feed Nick's delusions, to keep resentment burning hot. According to Mel, they used Rob's cash to party, to drink, to laugh, all while fanning the flames that would eventually consume the entire family. His voice cracked when he said it. Nick held the weapon. He paused, swallowing hard. But a lot of people sharpened the blade. That line didn't need explanation. It hung in the air like a verdict, heavy, final, and impossible to ignore. This wasn't the Mel Brooks the world thinks it knows, not the entertainer, not the man with 1,000 punchlines. This was Mel the witness, the survivor, sitting in a room full of ghosts and telling the ugliest truth he's ever had to say. His words ripped the shine right off the Reiner legacy and exposed the real bleeding cost hiding underneath the glamour. It's a harsh reminder that behind the tall gates of Brentwood, behind the awards, the smiles, and the Hollywood polish, these are still just people, flawed, fragile, breakable, people who love too hard, trust too much, and pay a brutal price when love turns blind. So when the trial kicks off in January and you see Nick Reiner sitting there in that courtroom, don't just scroll past the headline like it's another story. Stop for a second. Remember Mel Brooks, 98 years old, sitting in that quiet chair, crying for the little boy he once bounced on his knee and for the best friend he couldn't save. Because the truth, no matter how loud the media screams, is never as simple as a police report. The truth, Mel said, isn't one moment, one night, or one headline. It's built from small choices, quiet warnings ignored, and doors left unlocked because closing them felt too final, too cruel. It's all those moments we brush off, the ones we say we'll deal with later, until they stack up into something unstoppable. And now that Mel's silence has finally shattered, what he confessed is going to haunt Hollywood for a long time. It hits like a cold chill, a reminder that even the people who spent their entire lives creating happy endings can end up trapped in stories too dark to fix. Rob Reiner's death, Mel insists, isn't just a crime story, it's a warning. A mirror held up to the limits of love by a man who's seen everything. Mel Brooks survived generations of legends. He watched giants rise and fall. And now, he's left wishing with everything in him that he hadn't lived long enough to see this chapter. The interview didn't end with a dramatic line or some sharp conclusion. It ended with a sigh. Heavy, worn down, and tired. Mel turned toward the window, staring out at California sunlight that felt way too bright for a day this full of shadows. His voice was quiet, but his posture said it all. A frail body holding on to steel resolve. Mel Brooks is done protecting the image, done polishing the legacy, done hiding the ugly parts just to keep the myth alive. Now he's guarding one thing, the truth, and the way he tells it cuts deep. Rob Reiner didn't just pass away. According to Mel, he was slowly consumed by the very life he tried to hold together, swallowed by love, loyalty, and guilt until there was nothing left to save. And that's the real tragedy. One that no amount of time, no therapy session, and no laughter can ever fully repair. Now that truth lands on us, the ones listening, the ones watching, it forces a hard look inward at our own families, our own blind spots, and the things we excuse out of love because facing them feels too cruel. Mel Brooks did something brutally brave. At 98 years old, he told the raw, unfiltered truth about a man the world adored, even though it shattered his own heart to say it. No spin, no Hollywood gloss, just reality, sharp and unforgiving. And if a man who's lived nearly a century, who survived generations of legends, feels compelled to shout this warning into the noise, then ignoring it would be the biggest mistake of all. The loss of Rob Reiner isn't just another Hollywood tragedy. It's a deep wound carved straight into the heart of the industry itself. Through all the heartbreak, Mel's words might be the only lesson strong enough to stop something like this from happening again. The investigation is still moving forward. The trial is coming. But to Mel, the verdict already feels written. The systems failed. The professionals failed. And even that boundless, beautiful Reiner love, the kind that once held a family together, failed too. That's a harsh truth, but it's the one Mel has been forced to carry. And now, it's the truth we all have to face. As the news cycle keeps spinning and Hollywood races toward its next shiny headline, remember this image. An old man sitting alone in a quiet room, surrounded by memories of laughter, brilliance, and light, now carrying the crushing weight of a dynasty's end. It's a chilling reminder that fame doesn't protect anyone. Not from heartbreak, not from betrayal, and not from the chaos that can grow right inside your own home. Rob Reiner's legacy will always live on through the films, the timeless classics, the unforgettable laughter, the stories that changed cinema forever. But because of Mel Brooks, that legacy now carries something even heavier. A final devastating lesson about love, denial, and the dangerous silence that comes from trying too hard to fix what's already broken. The silence is over, the shock is real, and the truth is far more painful than any script, any movie, or any piece of fiction could ever be. This is the story Mel Brooks felt he had to tell, and the story the world needed to hear, no matter how much it hurts to listen, because in the end, truth is the only thing that truly honors the dead. And Mel did exactly that. He honored his best friend by refusing to let this tragedy get flattened into another empty headline or forgotten news clip. He chose honesty over comfort, truth over legacy, and courage over silence. So let this story stay with you. Let it make you think. Let it make you feel. And if it hit you even a fraction as deeply as it hit Mel, don't let it fade away. Like this video, subscribe to the channel, share it with someone who needs to hear it, and drop a comment below. We want to know what you think. Your voice matters, and this story deserves to be remembered.